because there was mold in the bathrooms or in kitchens. I've seen it myself. Flakes of paint with asbestos falling into kitchens. Again, these conditions are intolerable. And what we need is strong, effective legislation that will give families the tools they need to make sure contractors comply with the obligations they have and put on our military the burden of protecting those families. We're going to do that by making landlords financially accountable, by giving the military families strong protective standards for what housing should be, and requiring the military to be accountable as well to us. I've asked questions, as have my colleagues, about military housing of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, of the secretaries of defense. Now it's time for legislation to protect our military families. 700,000, that's right, 700,000 service members and their families presently face hazardous conditions that may cause respiratory illness, developmental delays, other kinds of severe diseases and effects, rashes, neurological symptoms, vision loss, seizures, and chronic conditions. These health effects are not imaginary. They are real and consequential. And this bicameral, bipartisan legislation, I hope, will be passed swiftly and surely. It ought to be above politics. It should be about caring for men and women who raise their right hand and pledge to uphold our law. We need to give them lawful protections so that they can sleep at night and have a safe place to call home. Let me now call on Erica Thompson, and she will be followed by Senator Ernst, then Brandon Chapo, Senator Hirono, Jackie Tallarico, Representative Panetta, and we'll take questions. After that, we'll turn the questions over to the most qualified people here. Jackie. I'm sorry, Erica.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Senator. We came to Washington a few months ago to share our family experience. This is actually in our home, this photo here. Our home was contaminated with toxic mold. We lost our family dog, we lost most of our belongings, and our children lost their health. As a result of that exposure, all 5 of our children are now medically disqualified to serve in the military. We had diagnoses ranging from brain inflammation, asthma, to cardiac issues, to POTS, and bilateral pediatric cataracts, developed in both eyes after toxic exposure. Through our partnership with Change the Air Foundation, we shared stories of families across the country, from Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson to Camp Lejeune, to MacDill Air Force Base to Fort Carson. Families suffering profound loss and severe medical harm due to toxic environmental exposure in base housing. These are not isolated incidents. This is a systemic failure. The MOLD Act is a direct and urgent response from Congress to what is happening right now in military housing across the nation. It provides the necessary protection and oversight for families who stand behind, for the families who stand behind the military who serve our great nation. Most importantly, it does recognize that the serious health consequences of environmental toxins are real, and they are happening to military families. Thank you to the senators and members of Congress for responding decisively to an issue that directly impacts readiness, retention, and long-term health of the military families across every branch. We're grateful for your leadership, and we are hopeful that all parts of the government will act with the same urgency so that families currently living in dangerous conditions will receive the same protection, support, and assistance they desperately need. Senator Ernst.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Well done, Erica. Thank you all so much for being here today. I'm Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa. Our military men and women and their families make countless sacrifices to serve our nation. Those who take up the call to service, like myself in my younger days, and today my daughter who serves in the Army, accept uncertainty and give up comforts of civilian life. Now, whether that means moving, deploying, or missing holidays and loved ones, they do it, and they do it for us. But their state of living should not be another sacrifice that they are required to make. However, reports of mold and safety hazards in privatized housing designed for military families, they are unacceptable. At the expense of our service members, their families, and their health, just as Erica stated, and an expense that comes out of their own pockets. Through the Mold Act, we are taking action to end this. By establishing mold and safety standards and required reporting, we can do the very bare minimum. This is the bare minimum that we can do to ensure healthy living conditions. It is absolutely the right thing to do. For our service members, their families, and the future of our armed forces, we must treat our service members and women with the dignity they have earned, and that they absolutely need to care for their families. So I do want to say thank you so much to Senators Hirono and Blumenthal, and to Congressman Panetta. Thank you for your leadership, and especially to these families that are here today for their advocacy. They have been tireless in working with the members of Congress and making us aware of the conditions. So God bless you all. Thank you so much, and thank you for continuing the fight. Really appreciate it. And I will be followed by Brandon Chapo. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Good afternoon. I'm Brandon Chapo, co-founder and director of public policy for Change the Air Foundation. This is a historic moment for military families. Thanks to the leadership of Senator Blumenthal and the bipartisan sponsors of the Military Occupancy Living Defense Act, or MOLD Act, Congress is responding to a crisis that has harmed military families' health, degraded mission readiness, and weakened the future force. For too long, unsafe housing, especially mold and water damage, has been ignored. Families have been left unprotected by a system with too little transparency and too little accountability. The MOLD Act changes that. It treats unsafe housing for what it truly is: a serious public health and military readiness issue. I've lived the health consequences of mold exposure myself after living in a water-damaged home, and I know how devastating and serious the impact can be when systems fail to act. Change the Air Foundation is proud to support this legislation because it puts military families first. It strengthens readiness, and it sends a clear message. No one who serves this country should be asked to sacrifice their health or their family's well-being simply because of where they live. This bill does three things. It's about dignity, it's about safety, and it's about accountability. And it's long overdue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Hirono?
Great job.
Thank you.
Aloha, everyone. I'm Senator Mazie Hirono from Hawaii, and I'm very glad to join the families and the kids. Good job, you guys. Okay. And, of course, my colleagues. So we have all been advocates for safe and healthy military housing, and I want to particularly thank Senator Blumenthal because you have been very persistent in your leadership. And this is a bicameral, bipartisan bill that would provide the kind of protections that our military families deserve. Now, the state of Hawaii has a lot of military housing, a lot of military families, and I have visited some of the housing units, and I have seen the conditions as described by Senator Blumenthal. Let me tell you about, well, a couple of years ago, we had a series of very important hearings focusing on the conditions in our military housing. And at that time, we had a number of bills, including Tenants' Bill of Rights, which obviously need to be improved. Otherwise, we wouldn't need to be here today, but there was that focus where the House and the Senate had very long hearings focusing on the conditions of military housing. So we are here to say that that didn't do the job back then, and we have to stay the course. Let me tell you about a military family in Hawaii. Now, they were living in housing that they experienced mold, so they alerted the appropriate people. There's mold in our unit. Nothing happened. The wife went to a doctor, and the doctor said, there's mold in your system. They move out, and somebody had to clean their unit. They get a bill for $6,000 for cleaning the mold. Then they got all their possessions shipped to them covered with mold. That should not be happening. For one thing, presented with a $6,000 bill after they had informed the appropriate people that there was mold and something should be done. The family should not have to face any kind of situation like that, and for them to get out of paying this money, they had to go through a process, probably even filing a lawsuit. So this is a bill that is going to enable families who have these kinds of conditions to have the appropriate remedies, which in a mold situation is not just going to your unit and putting another coat of paint on there. Because with mold, if you don't kill the mold, it's just going to keep on molding. We've heard of the terrible health conditions that ensue from exposure to toxic mold. So I want to thank everybody, and especially, of course, the families, so that we acknowledge that we have to stay the course to make sure that your advocacy will result in this bill being passed. And we have to stay the course to make that happen, because things could work a lot better in the House and Senate, I acknowledge, but with your advocacy and support, my hope and expectation is that we will get this bill done. Mahalo, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you. Jackie?
Alrighty. Oh, all right. Well, all I have to say is thank you for being here. For far too long, our military families, like ours, have lived with mold, moisture damage, toxic exposure, and fear. Fear of if speaking up, anything will even happen. And fear of retaliation, which unfortunately has happened to families. But today that changes. And our family, our Navy family, and so many other military families from Key West and across the country at Camp Lejeune and more are so grateful to be heard. The Mold Act is a long overdue response to unsafe housing, to unanswered complaints, and preventable illnesses caused by mold and moisture damage. Our kids being two of those, all of these kids here today. This is our house actually over here. And by setting enforceable standards, requiring independent inspections, and requiring accountability on the contractors, finally, it's showing that Congress knows this is a serious public health and mission readiness issue. We are so grateful for all of your support. No military family should ever have to sacrifice their life, health, and safety in what's supposed to be their safe place, their home, after all they sacrifice every day for our country. So we are so grateful, and we look forward to the outpouring of support. And I know change is coming for these kids, and thanks to Change the Air. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. Congressman Panetta.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Thanks for all of the families that are here and the advocates from the Clean Air Foundation, the MOA and Blue Star families. And again, back to Senator Blumenthal for his leadership on the Mold Act, a piece of legislation that actually demonstrates that we understand that military readiness starts at home. Again, I'm Jimmy Panetta from the 19th Congressional District there on the Central Coast of California, and we got a lot of beauty and we got a lot of bounty, but we also got a lot of installations for our military. Over 10,000 military members, 25,000 family members of military members. That means we got about 3,000 housing units for those families. Now, most of that military housing is the post-Fort Ord, if you know what I'm talking about there on the Central Coast, post-Fort Ord type of housing, relatively new. But I got to tell you, when I got into Congress back in 2018, the number one complaint that I heard from family members of our military service members was about the conditions of their housing. And the number one complaint about housing is what you see up here in these photos, mold and black mold. Issues that people living in those homes will tell you, as you heard today, doesn't just affect themselves at home, it affects themselves outside of home with the physical and mental illnesses that derive from mold. Now, just like 99% of the military housing throughout the nation, much of the military housing in my district is owned and operated by private developers under long-term contracts. But what I found is that when the military members would report to their senior leadership, the leadership would show up, but the private contractors would not. That would affect not just the service members, their families, it would affect military readiness. That is why I'm so proud to stand here with Senator Blumenthal, with Senators Hirono and Ernst, and other Democrats and Republicans in the House and in the Senate coming together on a bill that would require the Pentagon to establish humidity and ventilation standards. Maybe just blew over that sign. Don't worry, Jackie. It happens. If that's all that happens today, we're fine. But this bill would also require inspections and timely repairs, and it would make it harder for landlords to ignore the requests of their tenants. This bill really isn't that complicated, with all due respect, Senator, but it is the least that we can do for our service members and their families. They protect us from threats abroad. The least that we could do is protect them from threats in their homes. That is how we ensure our military readiness, and that is how we ensure our national security. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And I want to salute Congressman Panetta because he's leading this effort in the House. And he is right. It's not that complicated. You know, our men and women in uniform, when they're deployed, can't be effective if they are constantly worried about their families at home, getting sick, missing school, even going to the hospital because of the respiratory illness, the rashes, the developmental delays, all of the effects of water damage, mold, insects, asbestos, and this kind of basic protection is long overdue. It should be unnecessary. Let's be very blunt. It should be unnecessary. Our military should be on the job protecting our servicemen and women. And we've tried over the years, Representative Panetta, myself, and others, to persuade the military it has an obligation as well as an interest in making sure our servicemen and women and their families are respected by private landlords. They're under contract. They're making money. They're not providing the service that they have an obligation to provide. So, again, my thanks to all of you for being here. Happy to answer any questions that you may have, if there are any. What's different is the requirement for standards, as well as inspections when tenants want them, and most important, financial accountability on the part of the landlords that is enforceable. The law is dead letter if it's not enforced. And the goal here is accountability when families call attention to these problems. There is enforcement under the MOLD Act. Well, I could turn the floor over to some of our younger participants if they have anything to add. You don't have to. Your signs say it all. Healthy housing for military families. Thank you all. Thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator.
Good job. Thank you.